This might sound crazy, but the best way to remember chord progressions isn't what you think. Let me show you what I mean. Ed Sheeran spent countless hours studying the Beatles, figuring out every chord progression they wrote. Makes sense? And they're the Beatles, right? Then there's Tyler, the creator, who wanted to level up his production. After he started learning about jazz progressions like the 2-5-1, everything changed. You can hear the transition starting with his album Flower Boy. His production features intentional progressions. Same artist, but a completely different musical vocabulary. I'm guessing you don't have endless time to study jazz music or the Beatles catalog. Most of us don't. But what if I told you there's a way to build that same musical toolbox without giving up your life to do it? So if you're anything like I used to be, you probably got a bunch of song books, hours of bookmarked YouTube tutorials, and maybe even some fancy music theory software. And somehow, when the inspiration hits and you sit down to write, it all just vanishes. I can't tell you how many times I'd open up a session and immediately start panic Googling best chord progression or emotional chord progressions that work. Total vibe killer. So let me share something that changed how I think about learning chord progressions. Look at musicians like Jacob Collier and Charlie Puth. They both have what's called perfect pitch. Basically, their brains can instantly recognize any note they hear. This gives them enhanced musical memory and a deep understanding of how harmonies work together. So think of perfect pitch like having a musical supercomputer in your brain. It's rare. Most of us, including many incredible musicians, don't have it, and we don't need it. What we need is a systematic way to build our own musical memory and understanding. Sure, it might take us longer than someone with perfect pitch, but the destination is the same. Being able to recognize patterns and understand how chords connect. And instead of learning every song that exists, I developed a method that captures the essence of what these artists are talking about, but it fits into our busy modern lives. So instead of frantically searching for progressions during the songwriting process like I used to do, I made it dead simple. One new progression per week, 10 minutes of practice in the morning, 10 minutes of practice in the evening. That's it. Here's how to make this super practical. Each week, take your chord progression and write it down using the number system instead of the key-based system. So you would use a 1-4-5 for your progression instead of writing CFG. Why? Because now you can play it in any key. To keep track of these chord progressions, you can use your phone's note app, a simple notebook, or whatever works. The goal isn't to build a massive library, it's about creating a musical reference point in your mind that you can access anytime. And if you need somewhere to start, the Real Book, in a collection of real books, is packed with classic progressions. Or if you're more digital, hooktheory.com has tons of popular songs broken down by their progressions. Pick one that catches your ear and start there. But here's the most important part, the key to making this exercise work. Instead of trying to memorize progressions, I focused on recall. Every day, I tried to remember yesterday's progression without the material in front of me. That is the good old closed book testing method. Now you might be wondering, why does this method actually work? Let me explain it with something we all know. Think about driving somewhere new with your GPS. You'll get there by following the instructions. You turn left in 500 feet, you exit right, and then you make that illegal U-turn. But try going there again without the GPS. It's pretty scary, right? Something interesting happens when you drive that same route a few times without the GPS. Suddenly, you notice the coffee shop at the turn, you notice the weird-looking house on the corner, and the way the streets connect. That's exactly what happens in your brain when you try to remember a chord progression instead of looking it up. You're not just following instructions, you're understanding how everything connects. Now I was stuck in GPS mode. The moment I needed a progression, I would look it up. Sometimes it helped me, most of the time it didn't. And more importantly, I just continued to work with a shallow understanding of harmony. Now scientists have discovered that using recall is one of the most powerful ways our brains learn. The simple act of trying to remember something creates stronger connections than reviewing it 100 times. That's why our method works. Your morning practice from recall is like driving without the GPS. The evening review is reinforcing the route that you remembered. And the weekly focus on one progression allows you to learn one musical neighborhood at a time. Now, just like knowing a neighborhood lets you find multiple routes to the same place while also revealing interesting things along the way, let me show you how this translates to music. Take this simple progression. When you first learn it, it's like following a GPS. You're just hitting the exact chords in order. But after a few days of our method, something magical happens. Just like finding new routes and places to visit in a familiar neighborhood, you become familiar with the sound and the feel of the chord progression, and you can shift your focus to applying songwriting techniques to get a new song or song sections. With a chord progression, you can switch up the order, drop a chord, add a chord, play with rhythm, try inversions, and transpose it to a new key. All right, so are you ready for something mind-blowing? One progression, just one, properly learned, gives you thousands of options. Let me show you. With the previous progression, you can play it in 12 different keys, create multiple chord orders, incorporate secondary dominants, and apply different rhythms, chord inversions, and extensions. That's just a short list, but do the math. That's literally thousands of variations from one progression. Now you can adapt these progressions to any style or mood that you need. You're making music for days. So I'm building a list of the starting chord progressions that I'm learning at the top of the week. That's the system that I'm leveraging to then apply these techniques for endless ideas. So Paul McCartney says something interesting in the Beatles anthology. We learned our craft by taking apart other people's songs. Literally every song we could get our hands on, we'd learn it. Even songs we didn't like, because you never know where you'd find a good chord change. Now, I'm not saying you need to go to that extreme, but the Beatles became legends for that discipline. But we're focused on the basics, right? Getting good before choosing the next path of our music journey. And with that initial goal, you just need 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, one progression per week. That's it. No pressure, no deadlines. After 3 months of this method, you will have internalized about 12 solid progressions. But remember, that creates the foundation for thousands of possible combinations. So here's your challenge for this week. Pick one progression from a song you love. Spend 10 minutes each morning and evening practicing it. Start by trying to recall it from memory during each session. And by the weekend, experiment with one variation for the progression. Remember, one progression properly learned crushes 10 half-remembered ones. So drop a comment below with the progression that you're going to master this week. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more production tips, and hit that notification bell to stay updated. Until next time, happy producing.